Saint Augustine is considered by many as one of the greatest writers on the relationship between love, the will, and imagination. Although Augustine never wrote a single treatise on this subject, his scattered reflections on these realities in his many writings, most famously the Confessions, De Trinitate, and On Free Will, constitute the heart of his arguments. For Augustine, love, will, and imagination are inseparable from each other. Love touches the will and imagination. Imagination includes love and the will. The will is a continuation of our love and imagination. In the Confessions, Augustine famously stated that he was in love with the idea of love. He also wrote that my weight is my love. Wherever I am carried, my love is carrying me. In The City of God, another one of Augustine's great epic works, Augustine continued to elaborate the power of the will and love by saying, "We are nothing but wills of love." In declaring himself to be in love with the idea of love, Augustine is reflecting on the power of imaginative love, a love that governs the mind, the human imagination, which influences human action. To be in love with the idea of love means the mind, where the seat of imagination is enthroned, per Plotinus, is governed by the metaphysical reality of love. Thus we see the unity of love and mind, the imagination. But when he goes on to say, by the end of the Confessions, that my weight is my love, wherever I am carried, my love is carrying me, love in the mind, the imagination, has united with the will to create action. The love we experience and we fantasize about in our mind, in our imagination, eventually impacts the human will and our very much embodied activity in life. Although Augustine wrote On Free Will as part of a dispute over grace and salvation among monks, where he offered a middle road of grace acting first in our life, which then required our cooperation with antecedent grace against those who were articulating what we might call the proto-Calvinist position of grace only, and the Pelagian view of free will choosing God without any prior grace touching the soul, Augustine's reflection on love and on free will as an extension of God's grace is important for us to realize with regard to this philosophy of the unity of love, will, and the imagination. Augustine articulated the view that we first love by sight. We love what we see, which includes what we conjure up or what we see in our imagination, since the mind, the imaginative part of the mind especially, is a creative organ of image creation. As Augustine wrote, the will is not enticed to do anything except by something that has been perceived. Augustine here follows in the footsteps of Plato and Aristotle in the view that humans are imagistic creatures. We learn by images. We love images. We are moved by images. Augustine here was also important in the development of Catholic aesthetic theology, whereby souls are moved to love God by the use of images, not that the image itself is the object of desire, but that God is expressed through the image, and therefore God is the object of our love through the image which represents him. When read in the relational unity of love, will, and imagination, we see how the will acts in love through the image of imagination. The will is not enticed to do anything except by something that has been perceived. You should see here how in Augustine's construction of this idea, you see the unity of love, will, and imagination. In constructing an image of love in our mind to which the will acts upon, we discover and we recognize this tripartite unity of love, will, and imagination. For Augustine, this tripartite unity of love, will, and imagination, or the mind if you prefer, is a human instantiation of the Trinity. The divine Trinity can be known, although only imperfectly, Augustine adds, through this human manifestation of constitutive parts. The mind or imagination is the Father, the starting point. Will is Christ the Son, and love is the Holy Spirit, which binds the mind and the will together as one. When the will and mind are united in love, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we have perfect action. A perfect action is love realized, love manifested. Imperfect love is when we are left in immobility, a love that hasn't actually actualized itself in movement. The imagination, therefore, perceives a good in the image of its love. For as Augustine says, all love is itself divine, delectio Deus est. To translate the Latin literally, word for word, delectio Deus est, love God is. The perception of this good in the image of love in the mind or the imagination then compels the heart, the will, the body to action. The will seeks to be united with the image of love in its mind. This begins the movement toward astonishment or awe or wonder. Love creates the experience of wonder, of awe, of astonishment between lover and the beloved, when the lover comes into direct contact and experience with the image of love it had created in its mind. This basic understanding of love and how will, love, and imagination are all interrelated with each other becomes the important vision of love in medieval Romance poetry, especially Dante and Petrarch. Dante is awoken to new life through the image of Beatrice, whose image as a female carries within her the image of divinity, divine love incarnate in a human. So too is this true for Petrarch and Laura. The pilgrimage of the soul is the movement of love to meet the image of love, which has roused it from slumber. The movement of the soul to action, to love, through the images of love the will seeks, is good, as Augustine explains. This is something to be celebrated, because this is the movement towards ascent and salvation. This word is conceived in love of either the creature or the creator, that is, of the changeable nature or unchangeable truth, which means either in covetousness or in charity. Not that the creature is not to be loved, but if that love is related to the Creator, it will no longer be covetousness, but charity. The lower creature should be used to bring us to God. The creature, on par, should be enjoyed, but in God. The beauty, the goodness, the worthiness of all things ultimately point one to God. Every image of beauty, of goodness, of worthiness, of value is ultimately an image of divinity. This recognition of God in all things is what Augustine considers to be discerned wisdom. Wisdom, therefore, is the fulfillment of eros, of love, where will, love, and imagination come together as a singularity. This is also a Platonic concept found in Plato and Plotinus, but more thoroughly explored and transformed by Augustine and those Renaissance poets, writers, and theologians influenced by Augustine. In sum, what can we say about Augustine's revolutionary tying together of will, love, and imagination? Will, love, and imagination are not independent faculties of the human self, but constitutively interdependent realities within the human person. Love is found in an image of the mind, which is the imagination, whose desire for the image of love rouses the self to action, the will. The unity of imagination and will is found through love. Hence, as Augustine implies elsewhere, love is the beginning, love is the middle, and love is the end of all things. Nothing exists and nothing moves without the reality of love. Love rouses the mind, love rouses the will, love governs all things. When the imagination, the most powerful faculty of the human mind and soul, realizes this profound metaphysical reality, then the will, the body, is moved to act, because it is moved by love. This is love realized, love manifested, love transforming the soul to be an incarnation and an imitation of that love which governs all reality.